The Gainesville Times is on TikTok.
That's right, we're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Find us at Gainesville Times or G Times News to get the latest about what's going on in Hall County. Reach our listeners with your brand right here on Taken Too Soon. If you're interested in being a part of the show as a sponsor, email our team at marketing@gainesvilletimes.com to get more information.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Taken Too Soon podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or positions of the host or contributors. This podcast deals with mature topics that may not be suitable for all listeners. Material heard on the Taken Too Soon podcast is intended for adult listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
In this episode of Taken Too Soon, Nick and Greg go to Zack's food rack in the industrial park where Elaine's body was found. Stay tuned to hear an interview with UNG professor Dr. Jon Hager where he walks through Elaine's autopsy.
When we started this project, we pulled out the microfilm to walk through the articles we wrote about Elaine over the last 25 years.
So the first time that Elaine shows up on the front page is on September 24th with the headline that reads, "Search for Missing Hall Woman Continues. Car found at Candler Road Store Monday." Becky Nix will put another flyer on a South Hall store or government office today. "Just anything that we can do to locate her," Nix said, who reported her 18-year-old daughter missing Tuesday. "I've called the sheriff's office, I've gone up there, and I've put flyers out." Hall County Sheriff Bob Vass said Jacqueline Elaine Nix didn't return home after talking to her boyfriend, Billy Millwood of Cleveland. And then you go to the next day. Worry consumes family. 1,000+ flyers publicize disappearance. It actually has a interview with Billy Millwood and photos of him.
Who's that with Billy there?
With his mom.
Okay.
"We said I love you 10 or 15 times before getting off the phone," Millwood said. "We had plans to go to the football game and camping." He said she was planning to leave work early Tuesday afternoon because she wasn't feeling well and that she wanted to spend time with him. Millwood said he noticed something was wrong when Nix's cousin called and asked several times if his girlfriend. And then you have to jump to page 15A. Spent the night at his home in Cleveland. Nix also didn't come to work Thursday at Up the Creek, a restaurant at 1701 Brownsbridge Road, Gainesville, to get her check. She was a hostess. What seems so bizarre in the matter is that Nix's keys were still in the ignition of her blue 1986 Toyota Celica, said Sheriff Bob Vass. The car's hood was also warm when a deputy stopped at about 1 a.m. to check why the vehicle was unattended, the sheriff added. The sheriff's office is still saying there is no evidence foul play was involved in Nix's disappearance on September 25th, 1999.
Yep. 4 days later, that would be completely different.
And then on September 30th, the top and below the fold of the Times was, "Police began search for clues in woman's death. Body was found behind Gwinnett Manufacturer." And it's got two other stories of death shocks family, friends, and heavy traffic where teen last seen leaves neighbors suspicious. Convenience store clerk Rhonda Kisner walked up to Zack's food rack manager Wes Goebel on Wednesday, held a flyer up to him showing the smiling face of missing 18-year-old Jacqueline Elaine Nix, and crumpled the flyer in her hands. "I know," Goebel said quietly. "I heard."
The phone booth that brought Elaine Nix to Zack's food rack on September 20th, 1999 is gone, but little else has changed. Behind the parking lot runs a trail where beer cans, motor oil containers, and other trash are scattered through the brush.
So we're standing in the back of the parking lot of Zack's Food Rack. When I first came to Zack's Food Rack, I knew that there was a mobile home park directly behind the store. When I first came out here, I decided to see if there was a trail. Sure enough, there's a trail. And this trail actually leads directly to the mobile home park that is behind Zack's Food Rack, where at the time in 1999, there were at least a dozen violent sexual offenders who lived in said mobile home park. So let's go down the trail. It's a decent walk. Yeah, so see, I verged down that way last time because see, you see back there this blue and orange and stuff. Like I knew there was a bunch of trash down in this area, so I think it's right down when you go down that little hill where I found that boom box, and I actually got a good video of it, or not video, but a good picture of it. You see though how there's all this plastic and all that kind of stuff, like, in all honesty, man, that's what I kept thinking. I was like, if you wanted to get rid of something, and initially obviously the body was found somewhere else. I was initially thinking, well, what if the clothes or something like that was dumped down here? You know what I'm saying? I may be off the trail a bit, I'm sorry. I'm looking for my landmark. To get my bearings right. We should have shortly up here is going to be the deer stand. I went down there. So yeah, what's happened since last time I've been out here is some trees have fallen. But this is your distinct trail. So like these trees weren't down the last time I was out here, if that makes sense. But that dog is still there. Oh yeah, hey, spider web. Yeah, that's the end of it there. So the deer stand should be somewhere right here. Where are you, deer stand? We're at the end of the trail behind Zack's Food Rack. Behind me is the mobile home park that played a significant role in the Elaine Nix investigation. There was a detective that lived back here. There were the sexual offenders that lived here. And they did check all that out. That's part of the documentation we have. So that's kind of the shot I was thinking. Because you can see that the trail goes up and then right up into there. Trampoline Doberman. Deer stand. That's what I was trying to find earlier. Right where my finger's pointing. On that tree, you can see the deer stand that used to be there.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew it was directly across from that was the trail that led up into there. So can you see why I was creeped out by going too much further?
Yes.
Doesn't look hospitable or welcoming to me at all.
Can't get enough of Taken Too Soon? Check out bonus content exclusive to Times subscribers at GainesvilleTimes.com/TakenTooSoon. See photos, read old articles, review documents, and watch videos from our interviews. Subscribe today to dive deeper into this cold case mystery. Find the bonus content link in the show notes. And now back to the show.
The quickest way to get from Zack's Food Rack to Verona Avenue, where Elaine's body was found, is by taking Interstate 985. If you leave at around 12:10 a.m., it takes about 22 to 26 minutes, based on traffic, to get from the convenience store to the industrial park.
Here we are on Verona Avenue in Buford, in the industrial park area where Elaine Nix's body was found.
On September 29th, 1999, workers at the industrial park started investigating an odor, which led to the discovery of Elaine's body.
It's about a 30-minute car ride with moderate traffic from Zack's Food Rack to this industrial park in Buford. I think it would have been a fairly quicker ride back in 1999 with less development, less traffic lights, etc. Pretty remote spot.
I mean, we're out here on an afternoon about 2 p.m. on a Friday, and there's probably been only a few cars that have passed, so imagine what on a Friday night.
Yeah, Friday, 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Probably hardly any traffic at all, probably hardly anyone out here at all. And off of the main road, this is actually kind of tucked back. It's not like it was just right off the road. You actually have to come back here a good bit, which again, we don't really know what it looked like in 1999. It probably wasn't as developed as it is now, but the business there, we're guessing that it was in this wooded area here where her body was found. It just seems like such an awful place to be left. Because I would think back in that time, not much at all. Actually, probably the employees of the place that discovered the foul odor, they probably were one of the only ones that were back here at that point.
It's hot out here.
Yeah, at 90 degrees, it's hot and humid. It's so bad that like the sweat's just dripping off of you. So yeah, based on what Hager had told us about decomposition, it would have been pretty rapid, even in this kind of condition, much less 3 degrees higher as it was back then. It's hot, that's for sure.
I'm Faith Montgomery, the producer of Taken Too Soon. After recording at the industrial park with Nick and Greg, I mic'd myself up to show how long it would take to drive from the Gwinnett Industrial Park to Hall County. Hall County is 1 road away from the location where Elaine was found, but through the woods. So, I drove to the closest intersection in Hall by car. Here we go. I'm turning out of the industrial park right now. So we have just left the industrial park. The speed limit on this road is 45. I just hit 45, so I'm going the speed limit on the road. Driving. And now we're in Hall County. So that was a minute according to my GPS. I'm not sure exactly if it was a minute on the dot or under a minute, but it is a very, very short drive from that part of Gwinnett County to Hall County. After reviewing the audio file, the drive took approximately 40 seconds.
Hey, true crime junkies of North Georgia, are you aware of what's going on around you? Find out by signing up for our free newsletters from the Times. You'll get local news in your inbox daily, including at least 1 free article a day about what's happening in Hall County.
Dr. Gerald Gowett performed the autopsy on Elaine and listed her cause and manner of death as undetermined. We invited Dr. Gowett for an interview either in our studio or at his office, but he declined multiple requests. So we asked Dr. Jon Hager, an assistant professor at the University of North Georgia's Criminal Justice Department, to walk us through the finer points of Elaine's autopsy. The day after Elaine's body was found, Gowett spoke with a reporter from the Times, saying he suspected drugs might have been involved. Quote, When I worked in downtown Atlanta, we had 1 or 2 of these every month, Gallett said in his interview with The Times. They usually turn out to be drug overdose, so for me, this is not particularly strange, end quote. The Times ran a clarification on the front page the next day, stating Gallett did not cite any evidence of drug use and did not know the cause of death.
I'm Jon Hager, and I will be an associate professor at UNG, and I teach in the Department of Criminal Justice, and I focus on forensic science courses.
How long have you been at UNG?
Since 2019.
And how long have you been in this field?
I was an autopsy technician for 1 year, and I was a death investigator for 18 years.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 16 years.
Okay.
16 years.
And we've been looking into this case with Elaine Nix, and we forwarded you a copy of the medical examiner's report to look over. Did you have a chance to look over it?
Yes, I did.
What were the big things that popped out to you at first?
One of the things that stood out was related to the maggot masses. It talks about maggots. When adult blowflies lay eggs, they'll lay the eggs in the moist orifices. So we're talking eyes, ears, nose, mouth, rectum, vaginal area, anywhere where there might be an injury, or postmortem artifacts such as animal activity. Since she was found in the woods, there's a chance that animals might have got a hold of her too, and that will increase. Adult blowflies will lay eggs there too. And what stood out was that there was maggot masses on the torso, and which isn't one of the moist orifices. So it makes me want to think maybe possibly could there have been postmortem artifact in that torso area causing the maggot mass to be there? Because normally it wouldn't be a maggot mass there. The other thing that it makes me think of too is that if there was animal activity in her torso area, it could also disguise an injury that could have occurred to her by eating the tissue away. And the maggots eating the tissue could disguise an injury from being there. So if she received some type of blunt force trauma, it doesn't necessarily translate to injuries that were internal. It could have been just external. And it could have been disguised by the maggot activity or postmortem artifact from animal activity.
When you're saying phrases like postmortem artifact, what does that mean for the average person?
These are injuries that occur after death. They are totally unrelated to the death itself. So if someone were to, say someone were to just die naturally and fall in a river, postmortem artifact could occur as the body's floating down the river, hitting off rocks, logs, fish could be chewing on it. Or postmortem artifact could also be someone dies and they come back and stab them later after they're already dead. So there's different ways that it can occur, or it could be even EMS intervention. Needles being put in someone for resuscitation, and that can create puncture wounds as postmortem artifact.
She had been missing for about 9 days before she was found. Mm-hmm. How much do you think that played into the decomposition and what was found in this report? Well,
I saw that there was a time frame of 9 days, but what's not in the report from the investigator is we don't know what the environmental temperature was, because that will impact how fast the body temperature gets down to environmental. Because at 72 degrees, your body loses about 1 degree to 1.5 degrees per hour. If we knew what the environmental temperature was, we would know how long it possibly could be. But we do know, but based off her stage of decomposition, when you reach that stage of decomposition, you are the same temperature as the environment at that point. But we don't have the start temperature. We don't know the temperature was at the actual scene itself to kind of extrapolate how long she had been there. But I think based on the evidence of the case of her being on the phone and all that stuff, I think they have a pretty good timeline, at least, of when she went missing in discovery. So I think that helps as far as knowing a timeline.
The high was 93 the day that her body was found. Could that give you any indication of how rapidly the body would have decomposed with highs of 93? I think essentially from the time she went missing until the time she was found, that was pretty standard, was 93 as the high. Would that?
Yeah, that would speed up decomposition. It would speed up the life cycle of blowflies too. They'd be laying more eggs because they act at the they develop at a normal rate at 72 degrees too, room temperature, and that elevated temperature causes their development is much faster too. So she's also going to have a greater amount of maggots as a result of that temperature too. So yeah, her rate of decomposition will be exponentially faster at that temperature.
So that being said, could that shorten the timeline of
Correct.
the amount of time that she was out there?
Yep, that could shorten the timeline, yep.
So technically, her body could have been somewhere else after the night and then dumped there even, say, a few days before it was found?
To kind of give you an idea of time frame, at 72 degrees, in 8 to 12 hours, you get into full rigor mortis. That means total stiffness. At 24 to 36 hours, you start to come out of that. You become flaccid again and soft as if you just died, and decomposition really starts accelerating. So that kind of gives you a guideline. That's at 72 degrees. That's 24 to 36 hours. And given that she was nude, your body gives off more heat. So then you're decomposing even faster because you don't have that clothing on you to keep your body temperature. So there's other factors too, and also too the speed of her decomposition could be related to animal activity too. That will speed it up too if something was gnawing on her.
So it seems like all of those factors together kind of created this perfect storm for just not a lot to be left for a medical examiner or police to really dig into it, with the heat, being nude and emitting that heat, the temperature that day.
I mean, she could have had a stab wound for all we know in her abdomen area and been disguised, and it didn't puncture any internal organs. That's a possibility.
Because you did say that there was soft tissue
missing
there, and that's not a typical thing that you would see in the torso area.
Yeah, the maggot masses in the torso area. Yeah, so there could have been something else going on there. Because we were always taught, if there's a maggot mass, don't move all the maggots, just photograph it and save it for the autopsy to see if they recognize any injuries underneath it, because you don't want to disturb anything when you're there.
So to go back to the soft tissue damage, there was a bunch based on decomposition. How can that affect determining how she died? Because it is listed as undetermined. Do you think that was a factor in why it was considered undetermined by Gawit originally?
Well, during the autopsy, he did find no natural disease processes, so we can automatically rule out natural disease, right? And then the examination of the neck area, let me locate that. The neck area showed the hyoid. It showed the hyoid. There's no evidence of tissue trauma at the neck. There's muscles called strap muscles that are under your neck here, and when those are hemorrhaging or bleeding, it'll show. It's usually an evidence of some type of strangulation. It could be manual, it could be ligature, and that wasn't seen. That wasn't seen here either. But decomposition in general could disguise. I mean, just like if you read the toxicology report, how she was positive for alcohol, ethanol, that's because of decomposition, which was indicated. So the things can be disguised through decomposition. And that's why, or lack of decomposition can do it too. So if you take a body and freeze it, the timeline of events will eventually change. You don't know how long that person's been dead for because of being preserved. And just like this, being September, I can assume it's probably warm in Georgia. So rate of decomposition is much faster than a degree per hour.
You mentioned that alcohol can show up in the body. Can you explain a little bit more, even though that might not be your expertise, of how that happens in a decomposition where there might be ethanol inside the body?
Without her having drinking at all?
Without having her.
Yeah, it just your body creates ethanol as a result of the decomposition. Your body goes through something called putrefaction, which they talk about in here. And putrefaction is essentially the bacteria inside your body eating you from the inside out. That's the primary cause of decomposition, especially in Georgia. It's not like that in the West because they don't have the humidity. It's caused by the high humidity And through that breakdown of your body just naturally creates ethanol. So that can create a positive result. But it's gonna be negligible, very, very small. But if she had been drinking, and they talk about her having blood in her chest cavity, if she was really drinking, when you do the autopsy, you can smell the sweet alcohol actually in the blood. You can actually smell it. When it's decompositional, you wouldn't smell that. It would show positive because the testing is so sensitive that you could detect that ethanol from decomposition.
What were the other things that jumped out to you when you read the report?
The other thing that was primarily the cause and manner. And the cause of death makes sense, it being undetermined. But when you're determining the manner of death, it's the circumstances of the death. That's how you determine the manner. And when you're determining a manner of death, it's a matter of exclusion. And I'll give you an example of this, a couple of examples. Let's say a body is discovered in a body of water. It could be the tub, pool, lake, whatever. The first thing what they want to exclude is, of course, a drowning. So is there water in the lungs? No water in the lungs. So we know that person was dead when they were in the water. You find someone dead in a house fire. What do you want to exclude right away? Was the person alive or not during the fire? So they're going to check for soot in the airway. If the person was dead, most likely homicidal. So that's kind of how you want to figure out death investigation and determining cause and manner of death. A lot of it's a matter of exclusion. And with the manner of death being undetermined, it's a matter of ruling things out. So there's 5 manners of death. You have natural, homicide, suicide, undetermined, and homicide. So let's start with natural. Natural can be ruled out because no natural disease processes were figured out. Now, accidental. Accidental is death due to some type of misfortune. Now, considering where she was found and her being nude, her toxicology was negative. There's really a small, less than 1% chance she died there accidentally in the woods, behind this building, industrial building. So you can rule out accidental. Now let's go suicide. So again, no drugs were present. So kind of rule out a drug overdose, intentional drug overdose. You can rule out ligature strangulation, i.e. hanging, because there was no ligature there. She wasn't hanging, she was on the ground. So you can essentially rule out accidental too, or suicide. So we rule out suicide, accidental, natural. And now the last one to rule out would be homicide. Now, if it isn't homicide, then it's ruled undetermined. So based on the circumstances of it, her being found nude, the location where she's at makes you want to believe it's a homicide. And then also, in the report, it says circumstances of her death are highly suggest that she died by homicidal violence. So the question is, why wasn't it ruled a homicide? That doesn't make sense. So from my experience of working with law enforcement, they rely a lot on the manner of death and how they pursue their investigation. If it's ruled a homicide, they will go investigate until they figure out, who's responsible. And when it's ruled any of the other cases, there's no crime committed. They have no reason to investigate anything else until the medical examiner rules it as being a homicide. So then the investigation just halts. So that's the other thing that kind of stands out, why the manner of death is ruled undetermined and not being homicide, based on the circumstances. The totality of the circumstances, I should say.
Let me ask you this, minus the toxicology report, if you were just to look at the autopsy report, is there anything from the autopsy report that you can see that would make you, before you got a toxicology report back, assume that it was a drug overdose?
No.
And to go back to what you were saying, based on how it...
let me back up why I say that.
Okay.
Why is she found nude with no clothes on? That still doesn't, that's the part that still doesn't make sense. If it was, let's say it was, that's one thing that makes it tough about saying it was a drug overdose, just because the circumstances of how she was found. That's just bizarre.
So yeah, until you get the toxicology report, though, I guess is kind of what I'm getting to. You really can't make that determination based on just the autopsy report.
Correct.
And then to go back to what you were saying about how deaths are labeled, if it was labeled, if say it's labeled undetermined, and then law enforcement is told by the medical examiner that it'll probably come back that she overdosed from drugs in her toxicology report, do you think that would hinder the investigation?
Yeah, because they wouldn't pursue it. There would be no need for them to pursue anyone because they wouldn't be pursuing anybody except for her, and she's deceased.
Right.
When you were doing this type of work, how long would a report be that you would produce for an autopsy like this?
That's case to case. You could have someone who was shot 12 times. So the autopsy report's going to be really long. It's all, and you could have a natural death, which the autopsy report would be minimal. So it's case to case as far as the extensiveness. But what's done for each autopsy is very similar. It's usually it's really a form, and they go through each section of the body just like this one does. So what they went through is normal protocol.
Am I off base to say that this seems short, or it seems like there is information that somebody looking at the case would want to have to kind of further investigate?
The only thing I'd say is minimal is actually the investigator's report. I think is minimal, as far as there's no environmental temperature. The immediate scene description is only one sentence. that does not, when you write these reports, what you need to consider, and exactly what you guys are doing, is that you have to consider that there's going to be outside people reading this. That's why you have to write reports, because you guys were never there. I wasn't even there, and by me reading this means nothing to me. I would never know. I mean, the immediate scene provides me really nothing. So I think the investigator's report is minimal. I mean, it's very, it's about as minimal as you get. It's pretty vague for an outsider reading it and trying to figure out what, because we don't have the luxury of looking at pictures, and that's why it's important to have more detail in the investigative report to help people kind of visualize what the scene was actually like. That's the whole goal of it. Because if this were ever to go to court, you have to explain to the jury this, and this is and they're not going to understand. You have to put them at the scene.
Would a medical examiner be given any background information on the person that they're doing the autopsy before the autopsy?
Based on my experience, if there was a decedent, I would be interviewing all the family members and friends and incorporating that into my report. It'd be under a supplement, so they didn't have an idea, social history of that person. It could mean going on their social media accounts or whatever and kind of get an idea. Because sometimes we've gone on social media accounts and it was one of these conundrums of drugs. Was it suicide or accidental? Because unless you can prove it's suicide, intentional, it's going to be ruled as accidental drug overdose. And you could extrapolate off social media that is most likely a suicide based on their ideations. So social history, psychohistory, medical history. So we'd gather all that type of history about that person. So it'd be in a supplement. So it'd be that information. If you were to request it through Freedom of Information Act, it wouldn't be stuff that you would get. It's for internal stuff, so the doctor would be aware of this. Sometimes you have that stuff, and sometimes you don't. Depends how well you interview other people and friends and stuff like that.
The only reason I ask that is because not too long before her end, she had gone to a rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if, I'm trying to
whether or not they knew.
Right, whether or not they knew about that, and maybe that's why the medical examiner jumped the gun by saying that it was going to come back as a drug overdose. So I was trying to see if they actually do background or look at background information before they do the autopsy.
A thorough investigation would include that.
Okay.
And if that was something personally I would do, even if they went to a psychiatric ward, I'd include that too, especially if we're dealing with determining what manner of death it is. That's important too.
So the family actually has, her body was found with just a ring on her finger and a necklace that she was wearing. The family still has that in an evidence bag. They've never taken it out of the evidence bag. I don't know how much experience you have or knowledge you have about DNA testing, but do you think it'd be possible to maybe extract some sort of DNA off of those items?
The first question I'd have is, what type of bag is it in? As far as paper or plastic?
I believe it's plastic. It'd be a plastic
plastic.
bag.
Yeah, plastic is the biggest no-no for biological evidence because condensation starts, bacteria grows, and compromises DNA. But this say it was preserved correctly. Yeah, you could probably swab DNA because the technology has gotten so good that they can examine very small quantities and compromised quantities. So doing the necklace, you probably could. The ring, I don't know if there'd really be much on the ring because if it was a band like this, the odds of having DNA on the outside of it from someone, maybe not. But if it was maybe something pointed or some type of shape, there could have been DNA, on the sides or something like that. But being that was in plastic, if it was tested, it'd probably come back with a report saying that, hey, this is how it was preserved. These are the results, but we can't guarantee these results are accurate because of the way it was packaged.
When you say compromised quantities, what does that mean?
If for small quantities and those that may have been sitting in weather for a time period or maybe in water or something, that they can still do a DNA analysis on DNA that maybe even tried to been cleaned up before or something like that. So that's what I mean by compromised. Yeah, because it's supposed to be in paper.
Interesting.
Why is paper the standard?
It's porous and it allows it to breathe. That prevents the condensation like it would in plastic, which would cause DNA degradation.
Do you have any information you'd like us to look at regarding Elaine's case?
If so, please email tips to Greg Finan at Gainesville Times. That's GregFinan at GainesvilleTimes.com.
Check out bonus content exclusive to Times subscribers at GainesvilleTimes.com/takentoosoon. See photos, read old articles, review documents, and watch videos from our interviews. Subscribe today to dive deeper into this cold case mystery. Find the bonus content link in the show notes.
The music in this podcast was by Ben Ingram. If you like the Taken Too Soon podcast, be sure to give us a rating wherever you listen.
Tune in next week as we dive into the theories on what happened to Elaine. Thanks for listening. This has been Taken Too Soon, the Elaine Nix story.